This is the story of how the Segway flopped. It's a tale of broken promises, unmet expectations, and a lesson in why hype alone cannot carry a product to success. The year is 2001, 4 months. The world has been buzzing about an invention so revolutionary it will change everything. On December 3rd, this mystery invention will finally be revealed to the public. Could it be a cure for cancer? A new energy source? A teleportation device? Nope, none of the above. It's a $5,500 motorized scooter. In all seriousness though, this was a big deal at the time. As it turns out, the world's most famous inventors had been hard at work on something special. And no, we don't mean some boring thing like a new type of vacuum cleaner. We're talking something that would replace both cars and even walking. You see, the man behind it all, Dean Comen, had a pretty big vision. He wanted to create a personal transporter that would allow anyone to get around town easily, quickly, and without breaking a sweat. That's because this wasn't just some random scooter. It was the culmination of years of research and development into gyroscopic self-balancing technology. In fact, Dean Comen had been working on this thing since the late 80s, but he didn't want to unveil his invention just to any old person. No, he wanted to make sure that the world was ready for what was about to come next. So he carefully selected a few journalists to show his invention to first. On December 3, 2001, the New York Times published an article that would kick off the greatest marketing campaign in history. The article painted a picture of cities transformed, of streets teeming with these new personal transporters. It was almost like something out of a sci-fi movie. But then the actual event happened on December 14, 2001, at which point the entire world's attention was focused on this mysterious invention. When the curtain rose and the spotlight hit Dean Comen, he was riding the Segway. Then he removed his helmet and gave a theatrical flourish. It's not a miracle. It's a Segway. Yeah, super lame. The crowd politely applauded, but everyone was clearly disappointed. They had waited weeks for this moment, and now they were being told that this was it. This strange scooter was supposed to revolutionize the world. But here, it was doing absolutely nothing of the sort. But wait, let's take a step back here. Was it really that bad? After all, we're talking about a self-balancing electric scooter. Well, yes, but that was only thanks to a ton of hype. The truth was that this was not some cool futuristic machine. It was simply a scooter. For starters, the whole reveal was a huge letdown. It was widely reported that the Segway would be some kind of miracle machine. But in reality, it was just a guy on a scooter. Talk about anticlimactic. And that's not even mentioning the price tag. At more than $5,500, the Segway was way out of reach for most people. I mean, think about buying your first car versus buying a brand new Tesla Model S. Yeah, it's kind of like that. But perhaps the worst part was the design itself. You know, if the Segway had been some kind of sleek, futuristic machine, maybe people wouldn't have minded as much. But it was basically just a scooter. Sure, it was a little bit faster than a normal one, but not by much. Some early reviews praised the Segway for being able to travel up to 12.5 miles per hour, which is probably around 20 kilometers per hour for you metric folk. But the problem was that 12.5 miles per hour was way too fast for a sidewalk, but way too slow for the road. That's why most reviewers described it as feeling awkward and unnatural. I mean, we can't blame them. How would you feel about riding a motorized scooter on the sidewalk next to a bunch of pedestrians? Not great, we imagine. Not to mention that many cities either outright banned the Segway or placed other restrictions on its use. After all, it was a strange-looking contraption that could go 12.5 miles per hour. It didn't exactly inspire a lot of confidence in the general public. And we haven't even mentioned the weight. Yep, the Segway weighed a whopping 100 pounds. If you want to convert that to kilograms, we don't really know how, but we're pretty sure it was heavy either way. We can understand why many people felt that it was too heavy to push around when it ran out of battery, or why some stores had trouble keeping it in stock. The customers started returning them. The size and weight made it difficult to store, transport and use. So it's no wonder that sales never really took off. Of course, there were plenty of other problems. We should mention that one of the biggest was the overall cost. We already talked about how the purchase price was high, but there were also ongoing expenses associated with the Segway. For example, the batteries needed to be recharged frequently and they weren't cheap to replace. Plus, there was insurance, maintenance and storage to think about. All in all, it was quite expensive to own a Segway. Then there was the PR disaster that involved Jimmy Kimmel and a dead billionaire. Yes, the owner of Segway, Jimmy Sheldon, died in 2010 after crashing his Segway off a cliff. Now, we don't mean to make light of his death, but the timing couldn't have been worse. At the time, Jimmy Kimmel was hosting a TV show, The Man Show, and during one episode he joked that Sheldon probably died while trying to impress a woman. Some people thought it was funny, but most people saw it as tasteless and disrespectful. After hearing about the joke, Sheldon's widow demanded that Kimmel apologize, but he refused, saying that he was just making a joke and that he didn't realize Sheldon was such a sensitive guy. The feud made headlines around the world, and it wasn't good for the Segway's image. So basically, the Segway was a total failure, right? Well, not exactly. You see, despite its shortcomings, the Segway actually found a niche in the market. These days, you can still find them being used by mall cops, tour companies and security guards. However, it's important to note that the Segway never really broke into the mass consumer market. For example, in 2010, the company announced that they had sold 100,000 Segways worldwide, but that was over the course of 9 years. In other words, they were only selling about 11,000 Segways per year. And that was their best year ever. To put that in perspective, Apple sells about 200 million iPhones per year. So the Segway's total sales were less than 1/10 of one day of iPhone sales. In fact, in recent years, the Segway has become a bit of a laughing stock. We mean, just look at some of the memes out there. Some are even comparing the Segway to things like the Hindenburg and the Titanic, not to mention that it's been mocked countless times in movies and TV shows. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. You see, despite its commercial failure, the Segway had a profound impact on technology. You see, the self-balancing algorithms developed for the Segway paved the way for future innovations like hoverboards, electric unicycles, and modern micro-mobility devices. In other words, the Segway may have failed as a product, but it succeeded as a piece of technology. So what can we learn from the rise and fall of the Segway? First and foremost, hype doesn't matter if your product sucks. No matter how much hype you generate, if your product isn't any good, people will eventually stop buying it. Second, you need to solve a real problem. The Segway didn't really solve any major problems. It was just a more convenient way to get around, but not much more convenient. Third, your product needs to be affordable. The Segway was just too expensive for most people. Even if it had been a better product, it's unlikely that sales would have taken off given the high price tag. Fourth, you need to think about the culture of your product. The Segway was seen as a silly and awkward device. This is likely due to its appearance, as well as the way it was marketed. Finally, you need to be prepared for anything. The Segway's development was kept top secret for years. But even that wasn't enough to prevent leaks and rumors. If you're going to develop a groundbreaking new product, you need to be prepared for anything. Don't be naive. The Segway may have been a failure, but there's a lot that can be learned from it. By following these tips, you can avoid the same fate that befell Segway and bring your product to market successfully. Do you remember when the Segway first came out? What were your thoughts on it? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.